Morning, everyone. Charles Moscowitz. I only have a little time today, so I'm going to keep it brief. I'm listening to various programs, podcasts. This one in particular called Pod Save America. It's with this guy who just wrote an anti-Trump book. What is it called? And they're talking about. Let's see.
Gives you personalized daily
Never
coaching.
mind. They're talking about the January 6th commission, of course, and what they're doing is really despicable, and it's very insidious. And in a sense, it goes to the very fundamental problem we've had, I think, in not only this country politically, but societally, in a sense, since Donald Trump stepped off the elevator and announced his candidacy and created this craze. And it's obviously the manifestation of symptoms that go further back than that. But what it is that you have this massive disinformation campaign. By the way, you can call in 617-396-4958, 617-396-4958. I particularly want to welcome my Getter listeners. I've noticed that my Getter, I'm live on Getter, and Getter, I've doubled my audience there just in a few days. So Getter seems to be where it's at, and I'm very pleased and excited to be entering into the Getter sphere, as it were. Anyway, the businesses as such that, besides focusing on the incursion into the Capitol, which is something that we're not going to get to the truth about unless we have a real congressional committee that has both sides, which is not what we've got right now. They are focusing on the planning of the contestation in 7 states, and they're acting like this was illegal. They're acting like it was a crime. I mean, you should hear this guy, this Pfeffer, whatever the hell his name is. Why, Donald Trump committed a crime. He should be charged. The Attorney General should file charges because he and his aides had planned to help the contestation. And these people know better. They know that that's a lie. There's nothing criminal whatsoever about that. In fact, the founding fathers who crafted the U.S. Constitution created a mechanism by which, on the January 6th, after the election every 4 years, when the assembly gets together, the electors, to certify the winner of the election, there is the mechanism by which a state can be challenged. That's not illegal. It is not wrong to plan this. Of course you plan it. That's why it's there. It's supposed to keep things honest, so that if there is a question about a particular state with regard to the integrity of their election, then the evidence can be presented and debated and questioned on both sides, and a decision can be rendered. That's what that is all about. The day before the January 6th assembly, the New York Times, of all sources, came out with an article showing that this has a history, that this goes back. There was like, be aware Democrats, this kind of thing, that this has happened before. This is not new. And it shows that in elections going back to the election of 1801, the 1800, between Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr, the assembly, which took place on January 6th of 1801, there were contested delegations, and eventually the president of the assembly, who was also the vice president of the United States, who happened to be Thomas Jefferson, ironically, had plenary power to recognize or not recognize the delegates once the contest had been debated. And Jefferson basically declared himself president of the United States. The same thing happened in 1824 with the election of John Adams. That went into John Quincy Adams, I'm sorry. That went into a special session because there weren't enough delegates that were certified on January 6th because of contestations. It happened again in 1781 when Rutherford B. Hayes was certified one day before Inauguration Day because there weren't enough delegates since the Assembly could not certify enough delegates for any one candidate. There was a special session. In that case, they set up a special commission. And then more recently, there were contestations with the Hawaii delegation in 1961, which switched from Nixon to Kennedy as a result of that. There was a contestation in 2004 with Ohio in the Bush-Gore, not the Bush-Gore, but the Bush-Kerry race. There was also Bush-Gore, where there was contestation. And even the race between, President Trump and crooked Hillary in 2017, there was an attempt to contest. All of these perfectly constitutional, all of them legitimate, all of them proper. No one was claiming that Barbara Boxer was an insurrectionist and Cynthia McKinnon because they co-signed a letter contesting the election in Ohio in 2004. They were conducting a constitutional function. If there is any question about the legitimacy of an election, if you have at least one senator and one representative co-sign a letter requesting a hearing on that race, then that letter goes to the President of the Assembly on January 6th, who also happens to be Vice President of the United States. In this case, that would have been Mike Pence. And then there was automatically triggered up to 2 hours of hearings where evidence is presented to make the case that there had been problems in that state. And at the end of that up to 2 hour period, the President of the Assembly, who also happens to be Vice President of the United States, in the case we're talking about, that would again be Mike Pence, then has the option of either recognizing the delegation that had been sent up by the state or not. And the Constitution is clear on this. The President of the Assembly has plenary power to proceed in that way. So when this January 6th commission says that, there was something illegal about expecting Pence to do his duty and allow these proceedings to go forward and then not recognize a delegate if he believed that evidence had been presented, then that's false. It was perfectly legitimate. It was perfectly fine. There was no crime committed. In fact, quite the opposite. That was the last opportunity that the voters of this country would have to hear the evidence with regard to whether or not those states had stolen elections. We're not going to ever hear it now because it was shut down by the incursion. So, both sides can make all the talk they want. We never got to hear it, and that's undemocratic because the whole procedure was shut down. And we won't really know whether or not Mike Pence would have honored that commitment as President of the Assembly. In fact, when the committee was shut down, the state of Arizona was in the middle of their presentation, and it was an incredible presentation. I watched it on television. I don't know who else did, but they were laying it out in no uncertain terms. And you could see it the whole country was watching because they couldn't hide that. When all of a sudden, conveniently, everything got shut down by the guy with the with a fuzzy hat, the actor with the face paint, stepped into the Senate. And then, of course, once everything was shut down, there were 7 states that were scheduled to have hearings. 7 states where there was at least one senator and at least one rep who had co-signed or was going to co-sign this letter, there would have been 7 hearings, each of them up to 2 hours. The process was moving forward. And at the end of those hearings, the president of the assembly would have had the option of either recognizing or not recognizing the Biden delegation that had been sent up under questionable circumstances. If the president of the assembly had not recognized enough of the states, then the election would have gone into a special session of the House, in which case that special session, with 1 delegate sent up by each state, would have voted on who would be the president of the United States. That never happened because of the interruption. Who gained by the interruption? I'm not going to stay on much longer. I'm just going to say that we won't ever, obviously we know who gained by the interruption because the thing was shut down. We never got the hearings. And later that night, toward midnight, with no media present, the Congress reconvened and they gavelled Biden through without any hearings, which is highly, I think, unethical, at least. And so we're never going to get to the truth in that regard. But nor are we going to get to the truth about who was behind the incursion. There's a lot of information. You have to read revolver.com. Darren Beatty and his reporters, they did an excellent job of exposing that and bringing into question certain people, particularly this guy, Ray Epps, who's seen on multiple videos the day before and the day of. We got to go to the Capitol. We got to increase. We've got to get in the Capitol with bullhorns. He's never been charged with a crime, by the way. And there are several other things that don't look right. There's a lot of video that has never been released. There were questions about why it is that the National Guard wasn't called out in spite of the fact that Trump wanted it to be called out. There's questions about why Pelosi never told the Capitol Police to reinforce the Capitol building, about why the Capitol Police, on the one hand, let people in peaceably, on the other hand, shot people. The whole thing is not going to be investigated by this Congress because this committee will not allow ranking Republicans to go on the committee, which is unprecedented in American history. Every committee going back has members of the minority party appointed by the minority party to participate in the hearing. That way, the minority party gets to have their witnesses. They get to cross-examine all of the witnesses. They get to ask questions, and they get to participate in the proceeding. That way, the thing doesn't turn into a political monkey, kind of a zoo. I mean, it doesn't become like a theater. It doesn't become a political football. That hasn't happened because Pelosi refused to recognize the Republicans that were sent up to participate, including Representative Jim Jordan of Ohio. Instead, she cherry-picked a few people that would do her bidding, that are not legitimate, like Cheney and this other guy, this Kinzinger. And so we're not going to get to the truth. They're making these accusations that there was something illegal about planning to contest the states. If there was other people up there, they would have made the point that there was not illegal and that they would have brought advisors to the president who were suggesting such contestation. We would have gotten a rounded picture. But instead, we're getting this lie. We're getting this false picture, which de facto is a lie. And that gets to my original contention. I'm going to sign off. That being that since President Trump stepped off the elevator, we have been fed a bill of lies, and they have tightened the screws on who gets to hear what, the means of communication. As Karl Marx said in the Communist Manifesto, public ownership of the means of communication. No, they're not publicly owned. All of the big tech companies are not publicly owned, but they're operating as if they were, and they're in collusion with this, what Steve Bannon, I think, accurately called this administrative state that stage manages everything in this country, in the media, in academia, in entertainment, in big business. They have their foot in everything. And so they get to decide what's true, and they get to manage what happens. And that's what we're looking at right now. And it's a very concerning thing. It's very scary. I hope people are at this point conscious enough, smart enough, aware enough to see that this is false. And I'm hoping that if, and God willing, after the Republicans take back the House and Senate in the midterm, then there are real hearings, which include both sides, in which we maybe can get to the bottom of what happened on the election and on January 6th. So on that note, I'm going to sign off. Charles Moscowitz. Please subscribe to me on all of the stations you happen to be watching on, particularly Getter. And please check out my new book, The Biden Coup, The Political Social Effects of an Illegitimate Regime, available at Amazon Books, as are my other books. And you can go to my website, charlesmoskowitz.com, to see all of the links to where you can hear this program and upcoming guests. I have a lot of interesting things I'm getting into, and also my books. So thank you very much, everyone. God bless you all. God bless America. Let's get to the truth.